the Outdoor Drive Podcast.
All right, the podcast is back on. This is your boy East Coast Trev, joined by my good buddy, Mr. Madman Mardick.
I usually try to come up with something funny to say, but I got nothing today.
Oh, I was hoping. That's why I kind of paused. I hope that you had something for us.
I got nothing.
Nothing at all?
Nothing.
What the hell? No jokes, no nothing, huh?
Oh, yeah. You know what I had for dinner?
What'd you
You
have?
ever had manwich with venison?
Yeah.
Do you like it?
It's all right.
I call it sloppy doughs.
Sloppy doughs. Hey. Good one. I love it.
My mother-in-law told me that one.
What is it?
My mother-in-law, Sherry.
Oh.
Shout out Sherry for telling me that joke.
Did I say it was episode 173?
No.
All right. Well, it's 173, and we're here.
We're there.
We're chugging along. It's a good one. And I'll tell you what, you guys, before we kind of get crazy and break right into it, get your notepad ready, because if you want to geek out about whitetails, this is the podcast for that, dude. And I'll say this before it kind of gets out of hand. Rob was kind of on the fence of jumping on with us, right? And hey, listen, I don't blame him, right? Because he doesn't know us. We were in his group, and he's friends of friends and this, that, and the other thing. So I get it and I understand it. And he's not really, didn't do a podcast before, but tell you what, knocked it out of the park. What a great geeking out whitetail podcast. I know it's after the season. You might want to hear it before the season and whatnot, but he'll now get you in the mood to do what you need to do to be successful in the deer woods for next season.
Dude, I was in my freaking glory.
Yeah, I know you were.
I think we talked for another 45 minutes maybe after we stopped recording, and I could have talked to him another hour.
I know.
Easily.
The podcast could have went on for another 6 hours.
Hopefully he had a good time, and he'll come back on for another one, because I just love that kid.
It was a good one. It was definitely a good podcast, and definitely appreciate him jumping on. Another person that I really appreciate is Mr. Manish. Let's Manish. Yeah, Manish? Yeah. Manny. Yeah.
That tea-drinking fool.
Yeah. Oh, that bloody bastard. Let's take a break for our sponsors here before things get out of hand.
Oi, you! Yeah, you! Put down that mug of Joe and get your lips wrapped round one of these bad boys. That's right. Nor'easter Game Calls. Give it a blow. Nor'easter Game Calls. Get 'em in close. This winter, use Huntworth's Heat Boost products for impeccably warm body parts, guaranteed. Get more for less with Huntworth. Vital Ground Outdoors, for all your climbing hardware needs. Amstel Mobile Hunting redefined with Vital Ground Outdoors. New Era Archery, home of the Zeus Broadheads as well as the Hera. Let the Zeus loose with New Era Archery. I would just like to thank our generous sponsors. Back over to you, Trevor.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you to your sponsors. If you guys haven't checked them out, make sure to head over to theoutdoordrive.com. All the links are there. You can get on the website and get all the stuff that you need. Now's the time to start thinking about that stuff. It's just that time of year. And also thinking about it, show season is right around the corner, man. We are cracking into the show season, and we are signing up for more shows than we know what to do with, and that is a fact. One of the big ones that we are actually focusing on, obviously, is the Mohegan Show. That's a really good one that we're actually looking forward to. We're going to actually team up with some people. That's more news of that to come, but we actually also just signed the contract, and we will be at the Sportsman Show in Springfield. That'll be a real good one. Really looking forward to that one. We're going to have a couple good things, and as you guys know, our last podcast. Oh no, those haven't even released yet. I can't even tell you about that. We have a special guest that's going to join us in the booth up in Springfield, and you guys will hear about that one shortly. I promise I'll make sure to talk about that on next week's episode. We will be in Harrisburg this year.
I've been working on my owl call.
Yeah,
Harrisburg.
Oh yeah, you definitely got to work on your owl call for that one. The last week Me and Mardik will be down there. I may be there all week, but we'll see what ends up happening with that one.
Must be nice.
Yeah, shut it. Where else are we going? Anywhere good? Oh, Huntstock. That one's always
Can't
good.
forget Huntstock.
That one's coming up. We're starting to advertise for that. You guys, the first 1,000 people to buy tickets for that one are going to get in for a Woodsman muzzleloader. So if you guys haven't already, you guys can get over there and start buying tickets for
The
Huntstock.
date. I think he just released the dates today. What is August 10, 11, 12, or 11, 12, 13, something like that.
You guys can check all that stuff out. Some good stuff to look forward to after the deer season is now closed down.
Providence,
we're moving on to
saltwater, another.
Definitely going to show up there. Don't know if we'll have a booth for that one, but that one's definitely in the radar. I think we're going to stay more local. I mean, with the prices of airfare and stuff, my plan was to go to Iowa, but might not be on the list. Who knows? I'm a little bit spontaneous when it comes to that kind of stuff, so it might be their last and who knows? Whatever. Mardik,
What up?
wake up.
I'm here.
Are you sure?
Dude, it's been a long night.
Yeah, I know it has, dude. You're over here like daydreaming. Why don't you give everybody the Killer's Corner? Because I know they all waited for you and your beautiful voice to tell us the Killer's Corner for this week.
Well, first of all, the good news is I can see the bottom of the list.
Oh, it's coming.
We're getting there. But with that being said, deer season's winding down. Doesn't mean you have to stop posting stuff. So we want to see your sheds.
Yeah, definitely
season.
Sheds. Ice fishing.
Ice fishing, whatever. Anything in the outdoors, we want to see what you guys are doing.
It's not just about deer hunting.
It's not just about deer and all that stuff. So keep the posts coming in. We love seeing what you guys are doing out there. So don't be bashful. So we got Mr. Eric Boyles with his Virginia buck. Very nice Virginia buck. So congratulations to you. I also have good news for the pheasants in Maine because the season's closed and Mark Buzzle's not beating up on them like he was before. So shout out to the pheasants of Maine. You guys are safe for a little while.
Safe for a bit.
Josh Laporte.
LaPointe.
Public land buck on the ground at 11 yards. Did you see that? He had the video and everything of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it was from a
great.
GoPro or something. My man Sean Polk came home to Connecticut and shot a freaking slammer. So you can stay in Virginia, Sean. We don't really.
Yeah, stop killing our big bucks.
Stop coming up here, just showing us up. Sam Whitehead doubled up on a buck and a doe. You know what I got to say about that? Killer's gonna kill. John Boldick, nice buck, and shout out to his friends Josh and Jeremy for helping him out. Surprise, Mr. Guy Edgar on his another Sika stag. He's a freaking Sika slayer. Corey Paul on his nice buck. We got Lee Scholl on a nice buck. And last but not least, Danny Long with a Pennsylvania public land buck on November 2nd.
That was a gorgeous buck. And you know what? We probably should have him on the podcast for a... Oh, hold on. We didn't talk about that yet. Shh. Oh, we can't tell him that, huh?
Ooh, spoiler alert.
Oh, well, I guess since the ball's out of the bag, after the first of the year, we are going to bring back Tales from the Tailgate.
Woo! Whoop, whoop. Back from the dead, baby.
Let's go.
Back by popular demand.
That's it. Back by popular demand. So Tales from the Tailgate is going to be coming back soon after the first of the year. We're looking forward to that. Just waiting on a little bit of details to kind of crush that thing and get that thing back up and rolling. It's going to come back as a full mini series, so you guys watch out for that and get ready because we got some cool stories coming to you and we're going to bring them through all of the season, so that'll be kind of cool. Looking forward to that. You know, we started recording them, so we're just kind of stockpiling them up. We're waiting. We're actually going to have a brand new logo for that, and there's a new intro, so things are kind of cool. It's looking up. Yeah, it's definitely good, man. It's definitely a cool little thing.
Little inside scoop. I happen to know a little bit about some of the episodes already recorded, and they're freaking bangers, too.
They are bangers. That's definitely the truth. And while we're talking about it, our special guest is from the Tales from the Tailgate, who's going to be with us at Springfield, and he's going to bring up his 720-pound black bear. Just just going to throw it out there. He's his skull and stuff, and he will be in the booth with us throughout the weekend. So, just a little teaser while we're in it. You know what I'm saying? And all the good stuff, you know. We'll keep this one nice and quiet and short because we have a really long podcast for you guys, for all you guys to geek out about whitetails. We go a little off the rails, some good stuff. Rob brings some really good stories to us, and yeah, man, I think we should just crack right into a good old episode of Whitetail Geeking.
Yeah, I know personally, I'm going to be listening to this one a couple times.
You got to get the notepad out for this one. And I know I say that for a lot of them, but this is probably one if you guys want to target big trophy whitetails or even just put yourself in that predicament. It's probably a good one to just pay attention to, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get Rob on the phone, man. Let's get this thing underway.
Let's do it up.
All right, we're back with the man, Rob Cote. What's up, buddy?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us, man. We really appreciate it. I know you're like the legend, you know, the legend of the Facebook Messenger, right? So...
That's the best, right? You're like, you Facebook famous? You Massachusetts famous? Are you Northeast famous? Is it even famous?
Does it really actually even matter?
Who are we trying to impress anyway? That's what I always ask myself, right?
I like to think about that a lot. Like, what are we trying to impress? It's actually, in the world that we live in, it's just a game of chess with yourself, honestly.
Yes.
I mean, that's what hunting is, right? And everybody tries to make it this big, huge fortune and fame thing for no reason. It drives me nuts, honestly. It really does.
I agree, and I love the topic too, right? Because there's like an uncomfortableness with these conversations too, right? Because like, you know, people, you know, if you claim to be a big buck hunter or whatever, right? People want to shame you because they instantly think you're going to just shame every small deer or that they're wasting their time or they don't know anything or what, like whatever, right? Like, dude, I grew up a meat hunter. My family, you know, that's how I was raised. I was the same way. I got a ton of small racks laying around here that I shot my whole life. Wouldn't have thought, you know, every opportunity might have been your last. Is the way I was raised, right? But yeah, that's why I love the topic because it's one of those. It's to each their own. Like literally, you set your own goals. I don't care what your guys' goals are, right? I'll respect your goals. That's the whole point. You know, if you ask questions or we get into a conversation and bouncing ideas off each other, then all that plays in, right? I'll tell you straight up, look, if you're meat hunting, here's some things I would do to improve your chances. If you're trophy hunting, here's some things I would do to improve your chances. It's all about, you know, the sharing of information in my eyes and just supporting each other in that regard too, right? We're all after the same damn thing, regardless of what your goal is.
Absolutely, man. Well, let's put this thing in four-wheel drive. Why don't you tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
Ooh, all right. My name's Rob Cote. I'm from Massachusetts. I'm in Montague, actually. I'm originally from Belchertown, so I've been right in the Quabbin area pretty much my entire life. I'm an IT problem manager. I've been in the IT biz for, I don't know, probably like 15 years now, something like that. You know, corporate America shit. I don't love it. It's not glorious, but it's a paycheck and, you know, plenty of time off and all that good stuff. So last few years, I've been working full-time remote from home. I get to look out over my beautiful property every day and just enjoy that and soak it up. I'm a dad to my little toddler of a son and two stepkids that are 9 and 12. My lovely wife Ashley's upstairs with them as well. And I mean, other than that, it's family, it's hunting, and it's work. I guess those are kind of the three priorities that make life go around.
The good old American dream, dude, of just a white picket fence, right, Rob?
Yeah, hey, I'm like, if you want to get deep on that stuff, right? Like, I love to just tell people straight up, listen, this is what my life looks like, right? I was born, and then I'm gonna die. I just literally want to enjoy my family and hunting as much as possible in that time. Like, that's my goal, man.
That's American dream.
Who else? Picture shit, politics. I ain't got time.
It's American dream, dude. This is a good old country boy. I mean, like Hank Williams, you know? Like, what is better than that, dude?
Cram in as much as possible, dude. I love being busy. You know, my parents are workaholics. I feel like I'm a workaholic. I work with my family. I work with my job. And I work like hell hunting. It's just kind of got to be busy.
That's awesome, man. Well, you had hell of a season, dude. You what, tagged out both of your bucks in Massachusetts? Both bow, right?
Yeah, both two $2, same stand, 11 days apart, I think. And they were I killed my number 3 first, and then I call him my number 2, which is so unfair to him because he was the biggest rack buck I was after this year. I'm just partial to my number 1 because he was just a little different kind of buck. That's all. when I finally put the pictures of it, it was like, that was your number 2? What the hell does your number 1 look like? And I was like, well, my number 1's honestly not as big. Right? He's impressive as hell, but he just wasn't the same. This buck was, a freak and had all sorts of cool points and been chasing him for friggin' years. So yeah, I had I tell people straight up, right? Like you guys know, you set goals, you try to achieve them. More times than not, you fail. That's how it is. For me this year, honestly, like between the amount of work I put in this off season, because I kind of slacked a couple years after having a toddler and all that, right? You lose some time and whatnot. This year, I was like, dude, full investment. Got to make sure I get all my stands in. Do a lot of prep work. I went all out this year, and I went all in on these $30 basically. And the third one, which was one of the ones I shot first, he was like almost hardly on the list. It was really my 1 and 2 that I was facing. The number 3 just so happened to be in the area, and I discovered him, and I had no other history with him. But it just turned out like this was my pinnacle, right? Like this is what you dream of when the season starts every year. I got a list of bucks. Could I really ever kill 2? Like, come on. Like, it's hard enough to get 1. I don't kill a big buck every year, right? I see him every year for quite a few years now. I'll pat myself on the back for my increased sightings over the years, and obviously some of the things I'm learning and putting to work are starting to pay off. But dude, yeah, I'll be the first one to tell you this was a pinnacle for me to reach this. Like two big bucks, ones I was after, especially the big one, man. Having 4 years of history with him, and like that was the guy. Like I had encounters with him last year. I encountered with him the first week this year. I saw him in 2018 when he was freaking 2. Like I just had a lot of cool history with him. And aside from him being a crazy day walker and the hundreds of picks I have of this buck, it was just worried about everyone else taking him out before me, and then I got to be the guy that was in the right place at the right time, and certainly wasn't by mistake. I won't shy away from that, but you guys know, still takes some luck to be in the right place at the right time that day.
What do you think that you did that, like, because with your prep and everything, that put you in that predicament to be able to see him all the time?
The biggest thing I did this year, right? So like I said, a lot of history with this buck, right? When he was 4.5, it was kind of a build up. When he was 4.5, I ran half a dozen cameras up there, just Bushnells, no cell cams, whatever. Just threw them out, left them in the woods, and just let them soak for the whole season. I think I only checked them once mid-season because I was invested in another piece of woods and just chasing big woods bucks in another piece. And I knew I wasn't ready to hunt him at 4.5 anyway. Like that's just me. I set my low bar is 5.5. That's what I try to go after, and that's just where I set my goal. So I knew I wasn't going to hunt him that year. And then going into last year, it was kind of a stupid late decision on my part. I had pictures of these two in velvet all year. I knew they were 5.5, and I'm like, dude, you better start moving stands over. But like I said too, had the toddler, had less time, didn't put as much prep time. So all said and done, like I was saying, going into this year, it was just like, dude, don't make the same mistake. Invest properly. And from the start of last off season to this year, between the shed hunting, which I got beat to, right? I'll tell you guys that story if we get to it. Met the guy that has my buck sheds from the last 2 years in the woods while he was holding one of his sheds. That was something. But the thing that set this year apart really was really that intel and then using it and then spreading my stands out, right? So I knew where this buck liked to go for the rut. And the funny thing was he barely went there this year, right? So I put 2 key stands over there, never even sat once this year. And I was dying to hunt those 2 stands because I knew once he dove into that thicket, he'd stay in there. All of a sudden this year he barely does it. This year he stayed on his home ridge, which I know like the back of my hand. I was a step ahead of him, right? I mean, I really feel that way. By the time I got my last few stands in, or my first few stands in August, right? I was doing some late summer stuff. I'm like, these are spots I know I need to be in. When November hits, I want to be in the thick shit, not outside of it. And a lot of that paid off, right? So one of those stands that I encountered at opening day last year, he pops up 80 yards behind me. I had so many pictures of him coming up in my stand, and sure enough, that night he popped up behind me. I'm like, okay. Well, this year I adjusted that stand probably another 80, 90 yards so that regardless of where he pops up in that area, he should eventually make it to me. Worked out great. Went by me at 37 yards, but it was just like too dark, right? So that was knowing some of his habits. When I would catch him in that bedding area, I had to stand for him, right? Like that was kind of my whole approach. That's my approach with cell cams now. I've only been using them for 3 years, but like that's kind of my approach now, right? I key in on the bedding areas they use most, get a stand in or two stands in and around it, and then also cameras kind of in between all my stands, right? So I know I can kind of get a general idea what he's doing if I get a picture and try to get as much information out of it as I can. Turned out to be fun as hell this year, right? Think situations like that. I'm sitting in one stand. What do you think happened on five times this year? 5 times this year. 2 with my number 1 and 3 times with this one. I'm sitting in one stand and whoop, there goes my cell cam at the next stand over, and one of them's walking by, and I'm like, dude, I'm measuring on my app. What is he, like 350 yards away? Like, what the hell, right?
He could do that by dark.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, yeah, and I'm probably trying to head off the concerns and complaints about using cell cams, right? But dude, cell cams didn't get me either one of these deer at the end of the day.
Right.
The best thing about cell cams, as you guys know, is they just feed you real time information. You can't chase them if you already walk by your stand when you're bow hunting. So it is what it is when you miss them. But again, it's really just to me about the whole plan, the grid of cameras, the grid of stands, picking where to be when, where I thought he would be based on the last picture, all that stuff, right? Like I hadn't had a picture of him in 2 days, but this was by far my hottest stand, right? So I shot the 9-pointer Saturday the 12th after that big rainstorm blew through, and 2 things were big that day, right? I had sat that stand 3 times prior, and they were all with the south-southwest. Which basically, and I'm on the south end of the ridge, so south-southwest was basically blowing all my wind back up into the ridge and into the bedding area that I'm hunting, which is okay to some degree, right? Because I'm hunting big bucks. I know they need the wind. So south-southwest was like probably more risky than I would have liked, but doable. That day, the wind was coming out of the west. And when the wind comes out of the west there, these bucks wrap around the end of the ridge, right? They come from the other side and they come over to this side right into the wind. And sure as shit, that's what he was doing, right? As soon as that rain bailed, wind switched out of the west, 1:15 in the afternoon, I look up and I see the antlers going through the freaking laurel, right? And called him right to the base of the tree, which I haven't done with a ton of deer, so that was just incredible. Like, talk about a time you wish you had a camera with you, right? Like, he came right to the base of the tree. Just so cool. But that was it, right? Planning to me, I'm big on planning ahead. If I can hang all my stands in August, I will. And I know there's a risk to that, right? Because 2 or 3 of those stands are probably going to end up dead that year. That's just what always happens. You can't always predict where they're going to be. But that's part of knowing these deer, knowing that area. And what it really came down to, both days I killed out of that stand was just I knew that was the hottest stand. I knew that was the place to be. He was there 3 or 4 days before on that Friday, I think, and then I shot him on a Wednesday. So, like, I knew he was in that area. Tons of does using it. A couple young bucks floating through a bunch, too. So I'm like, it just had to be. It had to be that spot where I was going to wait him out. And I knew, I think it was the night before or 2 nights before, I got a picture of him in his rut area. And like I told you, I hadn't been in there yet. And I wanted to go over there so bad, right? Because the other thing about his rut area, that's the side my dad hunts. And I never even got to like park with my dad and walk in with my dad this season, which we usually do a good half a dozen times if I hunt that side, right? And I never got to this year. And so like that's leaning on me too. And I'm like, you know what? I'm probably gonna meet you there tomorrow, Dad, right? And then sure as shit, like I couldn't hunt that day, and then my Wednesday to Saturday off was coming up again. And just knew that had to be it. Just had to sit that one out. And blew out deer on the way in the morning, and that gets. I know that gets some people feeling down. To me, I'm like, good, there's deer here, because out here you could be a mile from them and not see anything all day, right? You don't know. So when I walk into deer, I'm like, all right, that's a good start. At least they're in the area. I saw one doe that morning, didn't see anything for the rest of the morning. I was like, man, this sucks. And then But the afternoon just got wild in a hurry, right? Like all of a sudden does come running in, and then you hear the grunt and the laurel, and I'm like, okay, somebody's finally messing with them. Then I hear more does coming in. One of the does runs off. It just started getting all hectic real quick, and then once I laid eyes on him, man, and you see this in the laurel, right? When he turns and looks your way, you're like, oh shit, it's happening. And so craziest thing that hunt, I might as well finish the story right while I'm in it. At 2:00 that day, I had a guy scouting for gun season freaking walk right through, right? He basically walked right through the rub line that's outside of the bedding area, right between me and the bedding area, 2 PM. And I'm just like, really, man? Like I already have barely seen anything today. And I'm like, now you're cutting through. I'm like, this is just not going my way. And that buck, he's coming in just like the first one I shot. He's walking across and he hits the dude's scent trail and just stops. And that's when I saw this a couple times. He kept looking around with a freaking huge frame swinging through the laurel. And, now my heart's pounding, right? I'm like, he's going to bail. He's just going to totally leave. Like, this isn't going to happen. Or he's just going to, I had 5 does around me or whatever. I'm like, he's just going to run one off. This isn't even going to happen. Nope. Instead of crossing the guy's trail to follow the 2 does that he was following, he just turned away from the guy's trail like they typically do, except instead of walking away, he just came right down the run at 20 yards, and that was that. So, but one of those heart pumping moments when you're like, dude, it's all happening, right? This is it. This is the buck. This is him. Here we are. We're close. It's gonna happen, right? I'm gonna get my shot, and then to see him stand over that guy's scent trail like that, I get all nervous. I'm like, this is it. But
isn't it crazy how that happens though? Like when it happens, all the pieces of the puzzle align and set right in. Like it's the craziest thing. Like anytime that I've ever shot a big buck, like it just everything comes together and it just happens. Like picture perfect. You think you're Mark Drury in a field and this giant's come and die and you're filming and like it all just happens. And you're like, how you just have this like weird thought and you're like, how did that even, that's not even real life. Like, it's literally not even real life. Really.
No, especially after all the hours you spend out there, right? Like I think the fun thing about a spot like this is a new stand for me, right? I just hung it. It was actually the last stand I hung this year. And I think I hung it like the last week of September or something. And I knew it was an easy hang. I knew it was easy access and an easy hang. So I kind of just put it off. And I was like, if I decide to hang one there, I'll hang one there. Well, of course, it turns out to be like my best stand this season, right? And, but yeah, like I just remember, sitting in that stand for the previous hunts, and I just so happened to see deer out of that stand every sit this year, which doesn't happen around here. I mean, like I said, it was a hot stand for sure. But like sitting there, and a deer goes this way, and a deer comes in that way. They do what they always do around here. They come from spots you never would have expected, right? But shit, the 2 big bucks I shot did exactly what they did whenever I got a picture of a big buck in there. They all hit the same damn little sneaky trail they like that leads right to the big community scrape, and they barely touch the community scrape all damn year. But every big buck I saw at that stand did exactly what they do when I get them on camera. It was like, like you said, it was just, oh yeah, this is exactly what I've been waiting for. Oh, there it is. It finally actually happened.
That's it. So you're hunting a lot of laurel, like big woods, laurel. How do you dissect that to make that a successful hunt, though? Because there's so much, like we have laurel, and I try and stay as far away from it as utterly possible because it is so tough to dissect it and understand what is workable and what isn't. You know what I'm saying? Because you're spending so much time trying to find that sign in it, and it's almost impossible. How do you enter it? You know what I'm saying? There's a lot to break down in it.
Yeah, I think what I've learned the most about it over the last, call it like 6 years, that's really when I started like big woods hunting or whatever. And so like when I learned up the street from my house right now, and I hunted it 2 years, I didn't even hunt it this year, right? Like there's a ton of guys around here. There's a ton of deer around here too. But I started learning that laurel up the street. That's a different beast. That's like what you were saying, like it's a freaking sea of laurel. Mm-hmm. There are areas that I would argue the deer don't even crawl through. It's so freaking nasty. You have to climb over it. But point being, it's a huge hillside, acres of laurel, right? For those situations, I'm all about just stay on the outside. You'll never get inside. It's pointless to try to get inside. You just find your ways to access the outside and hunt the doorways, right? I'm a big proponent of hunting doorways anyway when it comes to like hunting bedding areas and stuff.
What makes it a doorway? What's a doorway before we get too carried away?
So like to me, it's the spots they enter and exit a bedding area. right? Simple as that. But that comes in many forms, as you know, right? So like the way I look at it, because as you guys know, around here, betting is anywhere, right? They freaking lay down wherever the hell they want to lay down, and they don't do it that consistently, especially big bucks. But they definitely have their hiding places that they will retreat to more often than the other places, and that's all I'm ever looking for, right? Where can I catch you more often than not, right? That's the name of the game to me, is to just increase your odds, try to put all the odds in your favor. So, whether it's Laurel, whether it's Whips, some other kind of swamp, whatever, right? Like, I'm all about finding those areas where, and that's the spot I killed both those bucks in this year, had it all. It was downwind of the bedding area. It was a doorway to the bedding area. The does used it. The bucks used it. Scrapes freaking everywhere last year. That's how I found it in the offseason. I called it like the scrape triangle, because there was, I don't know, maybe a 2-acre triangle of just there had to be 30 scrapes in it last year. And this year they didn't scrape nearly like they did last year, so definitely didn't look as good this year. But it produced just as much, I would assume, because that spot was hot as hell last year when I found it in the off season. But like, so this Laurel is a little different than, say, the sea of Laurel, right? So in terms of like things to look for, how to break it down, like you said, this was more like most of this hillside and ridge was Whips, and it's either Whips mixed in with Laurel, and then there's a pretty good chunk of Laurel to the south that I hunt. And it's not thick, nasty, crazy Laurel. Really isn't. But clear and obvious, that's where they go in and hunker down. And there's a bunch of knobs and little freaking spines and shit like that in this particular Laurel bedding area, which they love. So yeah, and this place also has a ton of trail access. I'm hunting like 75 yards off a trail. They had no idea I was there every time. In terms of entry, right? I know a lot of people are hesitant to hunt trails. I hate hunting around people. I hate hunting around trails. But this year, what I learned about this place, especially while I watched these bucks grow up the last few years, was that they were killable, right? The cameras told me that they moved 20, especially the wide 10 or whatever, doppelganger. Dude, that buck was a day walker like you wouldn't believe. And the people pressure in this place is very legit. Like, there are hikers in those woods every day. There are mountain bikers in those woods every day. I hear them half the time I'm hunting. I can hear their loud mouths echoing across the ridge, right? And but that's just, again, if it wasn't for the cameras, if it wasn't for the intel, if it wasn't for the amount he day walked on camera, I would have never convinced myself to even invest and hunt there, just because I don't like hunting around people, right? Who does? You want the super quiet woods all to yourself. But this place just worked out, and honestly, that kind of thing worked out in my favor, right? Being able to access it on a trail, not have to go far up. Most of my stands are within 100 yards of a trail this year.
I think that sometimes makes it successful in those types of spots, because you were able to hop off the trail, and those deer are just so regular, used to people being there. So like you're not worried if you were in a big woods somewhere in the Berkshires or whatever. Those deer maybe never even seen or heard a human ever.
Yep. And even like so my other big woods is like over in the Quabbin area, right? And it's it's big woods, but sure, there's plenty of roads and trails. I mean, it's not big woods, right? It ain't like Maine or Canada. We don't have that kind of room to roam around here. But like, but like they're still big chunks of woods, and they're not easy to access. And like, those deer were different, right? They were definitely different. They were way more sensitive to my presence. They also day walked a lot because there was no pressure in the woods, and there wasn't a lot of bow pressure if you get deep enough. This place was similar in that I really don't think the bow pressure was there. Gun pressure is unbelievable in this place. But point being, right, like, these deer behave differently depending on where the hell they grow up and what they grow up around. I know for a fact, I've been hunting in those woods for 12 years. I stopped for like 5 or 6 to go hunt that big wood area. And I came back simply because my 2 bucks I watched in my food block grow up, and now they're turning into giants. I'm like, I guess it's time to get in there, right? So it was worth it. And it was hard for me, man. Like, I just did a 5-year investment in a new place, and it was real good to me. My dad shot a big buck out of there. I shot a 4-year-old and my big 8-pointer that I killed years ago. I got another buddy on a buck, and I mean, those big woods were great to me over the 5 years that I invested in there. And I was still learning that place big time, right? There was still a lot to learn, but it was very different bucks, very different style hunting. even different in terms of like what I had to do to get to my spots. It was uncomfortable for me to come back to this place, and I'm like, dude, I don't. The last thing I want to do is deal with a dude walking by my tree stand while I'm out enjoying a November hunt, right? And sure, the day I killed my biggest buck of my life, dude walked by at 2 p.m. So, I mean, don't let that get you discouraged either, right? At the end of the day, like, I'm texting my buddies, I'm like, what the hell? And I hadn't seen anything yet during that day either, right? So part of me was also like, yeah, I could just bail on it. Like, whatever, it's 4 o'clock. I could just bail on this hunt. Like, what's an hour? But I'm like, dude, that's not you. Like, you sat here all day. You're sitting till dark, right? Like, you ain't going anywhere. And it all came together.
And sometimes with those walking trails, like I've had some really good bucks that they've pushed around. Like they'll go up on a ridge or something on a walking trail. And like one time I actually heard a dog barking. And then here comes a deer coming right down the trail. And you're like, where did you come from? Like, it's the greatest thing. It's like a deer push without having a deer push. You're like, it sucks though. When you sit there and you hear those people talking, it's miserable. You're just like,
it just takes away from it, right? It takes away from like the solitude and nature aspect of it that you want to have. I don't want to hear dogs barking, people walking, joggers, all that. But it was definitely different. It was definitely different. I hadn't been back in those woods in a long time until last year and this year, and like, yeah, it was weird. It was a weird adjustment, and like I kind of knew what I was in for. All that said. Yeah, for the most part, I just heard voices of people up on the ridge. Like, other than that guy walking through, who was clearly scouting for gun season because it was only like 5 days away or whatever. That was the only guy I actually had like walk through a spot or anything. And hey, at the end of the day, he didn't blow anything up, so it's all good.
nothing wrong with that, man. Nothing wrong with that at all. So when you're getting in,
like that, it's all good.
yeah. So when you're trying to break those pieces of those puzzles together, like what are you doing? Like you're starting to e-scout, or how do you break those places apart starting in the beginning of the summer?
Off-season scouting, like you said. I mean, the shed season, whether it's December and gun season, because those years where like you kind of lose your mojo and you're like, it's been a long season. I got my butt kicked. Now it's gun season. The deer aren't moving. I'll take my damn gun for a walk and spend the whole day walking. I'll use it as a scouting mission and start moving cameras, right? So it all starts then, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
I love tracking and all that stuff, so I'll use those opportunities when they're there. But to me, it starts then, right? What did last year's sign look like? What did I overlook this year? What was outside of my cameras? That is like one of my favorite things to do first in the off season is go where my cameras weren't, right? Find out what I was missing. Find out if something was hot that I didn't know about that I damn well better be aware of next year to check on, that kind of thing, right? I think the other part of it is sometimes these things take a year or two to build up, and no one wants to say that because like I'm trying to kill a big buck every year. I'm not trying to kill a big buck every 2 or 3 years after I've spent a ton of time learning. Like that's not how I want it to happen. But like sometimes that's what it takes, right? Whether it's learning the terrain, getting your feet on like the whole place. Because I start with maps. You break it down by terrain features and see what you can see. But at the end of the day, you got to get your feet in there and see what it really looks like. Especially with places like this with trails and all that stuff, right? Because some of the best looking spots on the map could have a trail right down the middle of them, right?
Every single one of them. Every single one.
Every funnel, every spine, there's a trail. It's crazy.
So that one of the bucks on my wall was the first mass like big buck I ever shot, right? I shot him on the saddle in these woods where I just killed this year. This was 2008? Yeah, 2008. That was my first mass big buck, and I was like, that's when I really set the bar here and was like, I'm never gonna boil that, right? Like that was the selling point for me. That saddle is the best saddle on the entire ridge. It's set up the best. It is thick as hell for acres all around it. It is prime spot. My buddy killed an 8-pointer out of it, a 4-year-old 8-pointer out of it the year before. I shot a 5.5-year-old 9-point out of it in 2008. And like, we were like, dude, this spot's going to be great, right? But we're going to hunt here the rest of our lives. What did they do in 2009? Bike trail right down the spine of the entire ridge, end to end, north to south. There's a bike trail down, up and down the whole damn thing. And, so I left the stand there and I'm like, yeah, whatever, I'll hunt it next year anyway, right? So I'm sitting, first day I'm back in the saddle, all excited, right? It's November. I left it till November. I go in there, freaking lady, 7:30 in the morning, running down the bike trail right under my stand. It's all over for me. I was like, I couldn't. Yeah. To see a spot like that, just and I'm telling you, right? Like I left those woods all together for 5-6 years. When I came back last year, I threw a stand in the saddle because I'm like, dude, I was late to the scene, trying to get stands wherever I could anyway. I'm like, I'll throw one up at the saddle. What the hell do I have to lose, right? No, there's no scrapes there anymore. There's no rubs there anymore.
It's
just
done.
like it used to be. Yeah, man. There's people there every day, so it's like it's just not the same.
That sucks, dude. That's the worst thing ever, man.
Yep. And I have the 10 years ago history to like I knew how epic that spot was, and then just what it became. And even all these years later, I went back in there, and same thing this year. I left that stand up. I'm like, dude, the saddle, man, you never know. No, it ain't going up.
It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. Do you think that the spot where you were at and you killed your 2 bucks in those 11 days, there was a reason why those deer were there this year over other years? Like your buck didn't leave to go and rut somewhere else. Was there a food source that stuck them there? Or was it because this year was obviously a little bit different? Like for us anyways, there wasn't a lot of acorns. So those deer were scarcely looking for a different food source. So did that hold those deer in that area from the beginning of the season throughout the rut and them not leaving to go somewhere and rut somewhere else because that food source is somewhere else?
No, this wasn't food driven, right? So I had the same situation on the ridge this year. No nuts. I mean, the 2 spots that I was watching the closest because I know they typically have the best, food acorn production. One of them was all right, and that's really where I hunted the bulk of the end of October. Almost shot him there the first week in November if I was sitting there. I was in the other stand above it. But like that area had some acorns, had a shitload of squirrel activity, but quite frankly, like by the time the first week in November rolled around, the deer were done eating acorns there, and then they all kind of just dissipated and started going to other areas. So then I'm like, all right. And he wasn't hitting his rut range like I was telling you, right? Which is just the next ridge over. Like he just dumps off of my ridge through a valley and he's over on the next ridge, right? And there's a huge thicket over there, and that thicket has a lot of oaks in it. But to the south of that thicket is just all open oaks, right? So like last winter, that's where his sheds were. That's where all the freaking winter sign was. Like, and it's also the south end of that ridge, so it's all perfect, right? South facing. That's what this spot is. That's why I think I killed there this year. The funny thing is, when I killed the first one, it was 60 degrees, so I can't really say he was there to get warm because it was plenty warm that day. But by the time I killed my good buck on the 24th, whatever the day before Thanksgiving was, when I killed him there, the 4 or 5 days leading up to that, it was clear and obvious that there were more does in the area than usual. I mean, dude, I sat one day the week before. I saw 13 deer that day. One of them was a buck, and then I saw a doe only the next day, and then that Friday I saw 9 more does. So like I knew the does were like just hitting that laurel bedding area way more than they had been the previous weeks and in the whole fall, really leading up to it. And that's when the weather was first starting to get cold. So the first thing that went off in my mind was temps are dropping. They're going to get the sun on the south end of the ridge, right? And I really think that's what it was somewhat of a migration. And I saw some of that last year too, right? That southern end of the ridge, like they should in December, really picked up steam. Last year I didn't have any stands in that area. I was just running cams, right? So that was a big gap that I filled this year, if you will. When you look at my spread of cameras and stands, I knew I had to move into that spot. I moved 3 new stands into that area. I'm like, I will cover the southern end of this ridge and know what's going on and have options. And I think that's what paid off, right? I think for whatever reason, I just think it was the south end of the ridge and that laurel bedding area that really is what started driving the does there. And I think because my big one, he was 100% like lonely as fuck those last 2 weeks, dude. I had pictures of him from like, man, I want to say like November 14th probably to the day I shot on the 24th, like that 10-day stretch. Every time I had a picture of him, he's by himself. Like he's a lonely bastard. I'm like, it's like peak rut right now. I'm like, what are you doing, right? And he's out and about 2-3 times a week in daylight, like he always is. hitting my cams, hitting my dad's cams. He'd pop up at night once in a while. But like I'm looking at him going, dude, how are you so lonely, right? But that's what also kept me encouraged that like he's gonna keep making his rounds. And the cameras were showing it, right? He'd be on this part of the ridge this night. 2 days later, he's on this part of the ridge. 2 days later, he's in his rut area, and he's just freaking making his rounds around his whole area. And he was lonely every time. And I think what it came down to was knowing, right? Information. Obviously, the cell cams helped there. But at the end of the day, that was my hottest stand, and I just knew hunt the does, right? At the end of the day, none of my other stands, even though he was still popping up at some of them, and even though I really wanted to get to his rut range because I knew those stands were those really awesome stands, and I hadn't touched them yet. And he had showed up there on me a couple times, and like I'd get like a 3 p.m. pick over there, and I'd be like, wish I sat over there that day, right? He's walking around the middle of the freaking day. But yeah, what it all amounted to is just having available stand options, kind of knowing, having a feel for what was going on. Whether it was my cams, my dad's cams, whatever. Obviously, all that information adds up. And then it also comes down to conditions, right? Like if I know sitting in that spot and I got that west wind, it's so conducive for how they use that area, right? Like when he was there the Friday before, it was thermals in the morning coming down because they didn't start rising until 9-10 in the morning because it was pretty cold, right? So like he was at my stand at 8 in the morning and he was walking right up to head up into the high, get higher elevation. He was headed right up into those morning thermals at 8 a.m. I sat there for the rest of that day because I got to the stand late, obviously. And so I sat there the rest of the day, kind of put that together, kind of realized what he was doing, sat there the next morning, saw what the thermals are doing. So I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to get a feel for, if the wind's doing this, he's going to be doing this. If the wind's doing this, he's going to be doing this. And that's exactly how that spot played out. Like I said, when I killed the 9-pointer on the 12th, first time I sat that stand with the west finally. Like I finally got the wind I was looking for. And that's exactly what he was doing. He finally got off his ass despite it being warm that day, but it poured all night. And I think that's finally what got him off his ass. I hadn't had a picture of him in 10 days or something like that. And then he just showed up at 1 o'clock that day on the 12th.
That's nuts. And they're just that smart, and you have to put the pieces of the puzzle together in those big woods like that. It's not like an urban area where they have to move or whatever the case may be, or they're going to be in this area. They're in such a pinch point area. In the big woods, you have to just put all the pieces together. Because, like, relatively, like, all the guys that we talk to in big woods, they do the same thing, and that's 1,000,001 cameras to understand what is going on in an area. And it's smart, but you try and put, me personally, not a big woods hunter, have a couple of spots that are big woods, but you're trying to put all those pieces to the puzzle together and what makes them all successful. And one of the things it sounds like is a lot of camera use.
Because to me, like we talk about, right? You still have to take your hunting in stride with your life, right? Like it's all limited time, limited access. Like if I got 2 hours to scout, I'm thinking the whole like morning leading up to it, what am I going to accomplish in those 2 hours? As if it's like the most important thing in the world, right? But hey, man, you get 2 hours to scout, you want to go make the most of it. And cameras are no different, right? At the end of the day, that's what gives me real information that I can trust, right? I know how I set up a camera, why I set up a camera, and generally it's going to tell me, and I generally set it up so that it does tell me something important, right? Doorways, like I said, that is, to me, if I were to just pick like, what's your favorite spot in the woods? Find me a doorway. If I can locate a key bedding area, I can easily locate multiple doorways. And then the cameras tell the rest of the tale, right? You set some cameras up. Next thing you know, you start figuring out which spot is more preferable, which spot are the does using more than the bucks, vice versa. And then also you do have to mix in boots on the ground. You guys know that. I mean, the deer don't walk right in front of your freaking camera every time, right? So you got to get in there and put one and one together, right? You got to see that the sign matches what your cameras are telling you. And whenever you see that, it's a eureka moment. You're like, let's go, put the stand up, right? We're good to go. We have a match. So I think that's key too. When it comes down to it, if I ever had to put my finger on one thing, what I always preach is stand time, man. Like, maximize your time in the woods, maximize your time on stand. I know far too many people that hunt till 9 in the morning and then leave. Dude, I'm more apt to hunt 9 to 12 than I am to hunt 6 to 9. I'll tell you that. Especially when November hits. I'll take midday over first thing in the morning anytime once November hits.
It's definitely that persistence of being in the tree. You have to be there more than everybody else. Like it's an inevitable thing. And the other thing with the stand time that comes and plays a big role is that those cameras might show that those deer are there, but there's a lot that they miss. So they're only pointing in such a small area. And how many times have you gone and you sat in an area and there's deer that you've never maybe not seen on camera, but they're definitely not doing what they're supposed to be doing that they were to the camera, that they're 25 yards off it. Yeah. And you're like, dude, those deer have been coming all the way through. They just moved over 25 yards, and you would never know that if you're not in the stand. That happens all the time, and a lot of people play to those. Listen, I'm suspect to that 101. I started running a ton of cameras, and you're waiting for that buck to show up on that camera. And you're like, he's going to show up here, and you don't go and hunt because he didn't show up on that camera, and you go in there, and there's scrapes and rubs within 50 yards of the camera, and you're like, are you kidding me, dude? But you know in your mind you should have been there.
Yep. No, 100%, right? And I think that's why mixing the cameras with, like, you gotta scout. You gotta at least check in once in a while. I'll be the first one to tell you, like, I don't in-season scout enough. I kick myself every year wishing I just did a little more in-season scouting because, like, you guys know, you get on social media these days or freaking hunting TV, whatever. I'm not knocking these guys whatsoever, right? Everybody's got their own, like, approach and tactics. But, like, these mobile guys and the saddle guys and all that stuff, I'm like, Steve, you saddle hunt, right? Or both of you do?
I do. I'm the big saddle hunter. Steve's a stand guy.
Right? I talked to one of you guys. Yeah, like, I don't know how people do it. Like, for one, I hate sitting in a spot that's so thick I can't shoot more than 20 yards. That's not me, dude. I go in there with my pole saw in the summer. I don't mess around.
Right.
If I set up a spot that I know is going to be a late October or November spot, dude, I want to be able to shoot 40 yards in almost any direction. I mean, seriously, right? And I don't go crazy to, like, it's always going to be 40 or 50-yard lanes in every direction, right? But, like, I won't hang a stand that I can't shoot in almost every direction, and I'll make sure I clear some good lanes there. I put in hours of cutting lanes sometimes just to make sure that, dude, if the moment happens after you hung that stand, you really want them to be stuck behind a tree and you can't pull the trigger, like,
right.
You know, and that still happens.
Especially in November during the rut where they can appear, you know, chasing the doe. They're a lot less predictable where that deer is going to be standing. October, early season, a little bit more predictable. They're probably going to be on this run or this run, you know, on that feed to bed pattern. But come the rut, man, they could be anywhere.
They blow in fast.
Yeah,
like the chasing, freaking run around you in circles, all that shit. Like, you don't know what you really don't know what they're gonna do. I mean, it's true, right?
Right.
And then at the same time, right, then they'll come in super slow in November too sometimes, and you're like, what the hell are you so chill for, right? Like, this buck was surrounded by does when I killed him, and I'm like, he was acting like he was the slickest freaking dude in the shop, right? He's just moving in like, it's all good, ladies, don't run, you know, I'm cool. It was the freaking coolest thing to see. But you brought up a good point too, right? Like, I also think, you know, in every stand, like, hold on, let me back up for a second. So, like, getting back to, like, maximizing stand time, you know, I want to hunt as many days as I can. I want to sit as long as I can. And dude, unless there's something, like, drastically important going on that I have to attend, that's where I'm going to be during the 6 weeks of bow season, because it's only 6 weeks and it's your only opportunity. Mm-hmm. So then I start thinking, okay, now, all right, like, let's say I found a stand location, like this doorway on the outside of this bedding. Now I'm starting to think, okay, if it's the last 2 weeks in October, because I'm getting on these bucks the second opening day hits, right? I'm thinking what you were just thinking, what's that pattern like the first 2 weeks? So is this stand even going to be viable the first 2 weeks in October, or is this really just a November rut stand? And then also I'm thinking, okay, is this just a rut stand, you know, that I just need to ignore and I can cut the shit out of it now because they're not even hanging here really, but they will be when it gets cold and the leaves drop, right? You know, I think of all those things, and it really comes down to just maximizing your odds, right? Like you said, there are stands that I won't touch those last weeks of October because it doesn't make sense. Right. There are some stands, as you know, if you bury them in a bedding area in August, and I cut all the lanes out, and then guess what? They got the friggin' marinade for like 2 months. Like, the deer are cool by then. They don't give a shit that I destroyed the woods in August. They don't. Even the big woods bucks.
They might not even be. They might not even be using that bedding area in August. Could be completely vacant. Yeah.
Yeah, when I cut out his rut area stands, I butchered the hell out of one of those spots. It was in the middle of whips.
Yeah.
I made a spot in the middle of those whips because obviously it was a good terrain spot, but it was just nasty thick inside. And I found it 2 years ago, ran a camera on it the last 2 years, and I'm like, I'd be stupid not to put the work in to set this stand up. And I never got to sit the damn stand this year, which sucked, right? It was just such a cool stand. Yeah, I never got to sit it. I was like, it drove me mad. But that's the level I take it to. And I know people will be like, oh my God, you destroy the woods. Hey, I'll be the first one to tell you. If it's mid-September or approaching October, yeah, don't go in with your pole saw and destroy the freaking woods. Like, you're going to sweat it up, you're going to stink it up, and he'll avoid it for 2 to 3 weeks if he smelled you were in there that bad, Like, those things I believe in. But like, hell, in August, dude, I can go in there and tear the place apart. They don't know the damn difference. But again, that's also a risk you take, right? Because like I said, I hung 7 stands this year. 4 or 5 of them were like brand new. 3 or 4 of them I cut the shit out of to get in there because I wanted to be in the thick stuff. But it all paid off at the end of the day. And then the stand I ended up killing out of turned out to be one that required minimal cutting. Wasn't inside the thick stuff. It was just set up beautifully outside of it, right? And it was just the way they used this part of the ridge. Just it all came together so perfectly the way it worked out this year. And I think to what we were talking about earlier with cameras too. There's no predictability, right? Like I know, the one thing about my big buck is that he showed up too much. He moved too much. That was his detriment because I knew someone was going to catch up to him this year. I just had that feeling, and I'm, again, glad it's me, obviously, right? But like last year, a buddy of mine went into those woods during muzzleloader season to go with a group. He hadn't been in those woods in like 13 years, and he goes with the group, and he freaking misfired at my buck. He misfired, like had him at 25 yards, trickling out of one of the bedding areas that me and my dad have been bow hunting all year, and his freaking gun farted on him and freaking lit the leaves on fire, and the buck just walked away at 25 yards, right? So like, yeah, like I'm lucky enough to still be hunting him this year as it was, and then just knowing that when he goes to his rut range, it's like the freaking danger zone because that's the side where all the guys are, and then I knew 6, 7 guys had pictures of him over there. And this is all just rumor mill stuff, right? You talk to somebody and they're like, oh, yeah, this guy knows about him and his buddy Johnny knows about him and blah, 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 right? You just get information that way. And, it's like that's always weighing on you, right? But, like, that buck moves so much, which was cool. But that also reinforced the fact that they're so unpredictable, right? Because even though as much as he moved, I never knew where the hell he was going to be next. No way. Even with all the cameras and stands I had up, dude, it'd be like he'd be over here, and then he'd be a half mile over here, and then a quarter mile over here, and it's all within a mile and a half, square mile maybe. Like it's not a crazy big area that he used, but the dude moved so much it was unbelievable. But that teaches you a lot, right? Because
so
that's where that luck falls in there, I think.
I'm curious to hear. Were there any times like I know exactly how you hunt and what goes through your head, so like. You're always making a analytical move. So, like, when you decide where you're going to sit on a particular day, there's a reason. It has to do with wind and thermals, and you're kind of trying to put all those pieces together to predict, like, in theory, he should show up here because of this, this, and this. On those 5 occasions when you were on a stand and he showed up on a camera at another stand, were there any instances where you got that picture and you're like, son of a bitch, now I know why he's there now, and you kind of like overlook it or miss something, and like he shows up there and you weren't there, but after you can kind of figure out why he showed up there, but you just didn't see it coming or couldn't predict it on that day.
I would say I think the hardest part about it is just realizing like I said, maximizing your odds and understanding how much risk you're taking in a given hunt, right? So like I'll use an example. So what the hell day was it? Sunny day, high pressure. I want to say this was like 2 weeks before I killed, maybe the second week in November or something like that. We had bluebird skies, sunny, high pressure, you name it, right? All the conditions were right. Cold, all good. Like I knew, and it was a red moon that day. You guys have probably heard me harp on that, but I freaking, dude, that data pays off. It's no joke. I knew he was going to move that day. I hadn't had a picture in 2 days, and the picture I had of him 2 days prior was in what I call his hole, which is the nastiest whips on the side of that hill, and it's probably the biggest set of whips on the side of that hill. He was in there. There was bucks running around that camera. He was in front of that camera. There was does. I'm like, he's probably holed up with a doe. There's other bucks running around. The camera kind of told that story, so I was kind of just going with that, right? I ended up hunting above that bedding area that morning. Didn't see him. I did have a decent buck cruise up first thing in the morning, like a nice 8-pointer, had him at like 40 yards or whatever, but, let him stroll. And then, so then I'm like, all right, what are we going to do in the afternoon? Because lo and behold, I had 5 coyotes around me that whole freaking morning. Never in my life have I seen this. I had 5 coyotes hanging out, and they hung out. Like, usually they just move through, like the creeps they are, right? They just kind of pass through, whatever. They were freaking, like, laying down, rolling around each other, dry humping each other. It was like something I've never freaking seen before, right? So I'm like, I got to get the hell out of here. And I wanted to shoot one. They never got closer than 40 yards. So I'm like, whatever. So I get out of there, and I go to the saddle. So this was the only sit at the saddle this year, but it was my next closest stand. So I'm like, dude, I might as well go sit in the saddle. Beautiful day. What the hell? He could be running the top of the ridge. Why not, right? And my number one, even though he had disappeared the first week of November, theoretically uses this area too. So that's really why I love hunting this part of the ridge, because I got a chance at both of them. Rather than when I go to my big bucks rut range, I'm kind of out of the game for number one. And I know that. Well, so that day I sit up on the saddle in the afternoon, and sure as shit, if you were to draw a triangle around the thick spot he was in, it was the stand I sat in the morning above the thick spot, the saddle, which is just a little higher but a little further down the ridge, and then he pops up at the next stand that would have completed the triangle, headed straight into that south-south wind, right? So he came out at 2 in the afternoon, 15 yards in front of the stand I call the corridor stand, and he was headed into that south-south wind. So it's like I knew where he was, and I knew the wind was going in that way, which is actually the reason why I didn't sit the corridor that day. It was really because I was like, if he's in there, I know he's going to want to come out with that south-southwest. And in most situations, especially during the rut, I try to give the bucks the win. I really do.
Right.
Like I think that's a strong tactic, and I really think there's something to it. There's a lot of risk that comes with it too, right? If you have a wicked, shitty, swirly, bouncy wind, if you're in the middle of a hillside and you're in thick shit and your scent's going to just fly around, like that's ultimately why I didn't sit it that day. But I'm sitting up on the saddle, and I get that sunny, beautiful 2 o'clock in the afternoon pick of him in front of that stand, and I'm just like, yeah, that's what he's doing, right? He came out of his hole finally.
Makes perfect sense.
Headed straight into the wind, heading out to do his thing. And it was like, and that was one of the situations when I first saw him opening week, same thing, right? So this was a different example where I knew what the wind was doing. I knew about where he was because he had been down at my food plot at 3 in the morning or whatever. I got a picture of him. And this is what happened last year on opening day. He hit my food plot like 3 in the morning, and then he ended up on the hillside. And that's when I saw him that night opening day last year. Now, I had also put together a ton of other September and October pictures of him doing the same thing. This was last year. They were hammering my plot last year. This year, barely fucking touched it. Sucked. But like last year, clear pattern. He'd show up in my plot 3, 4 in the morning. He'd show up in the bedding area at the top of the, way up on the hillside right above it, right? And the camera showed that over and over. So same thing. I applied the same knowledge just from last year to this year. I got a picture of him at 3 a.m. I'm like, what better spot to sit than my stand right up above that bedding area and hope the same thing happens. And it was perfect, right? Because I knew with that southwest that day, perfect for him to come up out of there, right? Except the difference was I'm above his bedding area this time. I had a better stand location than last year, and it was perfect to where I'm giving him my win, but he was never going to hit my win the way he comes up and out of that bedding area. And it did, it worked out perfect. He just came out too late. 37 yards, stood under a hemlock. It was just too freaking dark to like risk it at that point. Kind of a steep downhill shot, and I was like, he just turned right when he should have turned left. If he turned left, he would have went by me at 20 yards. I would have killed him week 1, but it's just how it played out. But yeah, I think those. I always try to apply that, right? Even with the camera, like I said, you set up a camera. I set it up with the intent of if he does this, then I'm going to know he's doing this or vice versa, right? It's going to give me some sort of piece of information that I can build confidence off of, and then you build confidence, and then you start weighing your odds and the amount of risk, and at the end of the day, if you're giving them wind, yeah, you're adding risk there alone, but I also think that increases your odds because how often do you see a buck in November not walking into the wind, right?
Right.
They use it to their advantage all the time.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what they're.
yeah.
That's what
And in October's definitely different, right? Whether they're freaking creeps at that point, moving super slow. The thermal, they love thermals. They'll freaking sit there for 5 minutes and try to get a whiff of you if they think something's up, right? That's a totally different ball game. And people ask me about that all the time. How do you play thermals? All that stuff. I'm like, hey, learn them.
Yeah.
You gotta
Get in the stand. Yeah.
You know how many times I've sat out there and been like, well, I have no idea what the thermals are about to do, but I'm going to find out tonight, right? I mean, sorry, but like, hey, none of us are perfect. You can't predict it. You got to get out there and figure it out.
What I find is like you got to kind of just sit there and overanalyze it, and you got to like you'll get the swirl, and you got to be like, no, what? You got to just figure out what makes sense of it. Why the hell would the wind be doing? It's supposed to be doing this. Why is it doing this? And then it doesn't come easily, but after a while you can kind of okay, this makes sense. This is why it's going this way with this wind, and after a while you can almost predict it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's exactly it. Like I've gotten so much, especially since I started big woods hunting in that piece 5 years ago. That place was just thick woods, but good terrain, right? I was always hunting kind of ridge tops, steep hillsides, shit like that. And you learn really quickly how the terrain drives it, how the woods drive it, things like that. And then you also learn like when a lot of people are like, oh, but thermals, and I'm like, dude, you got a 15-mile-an-hour wind, like you can't get in thermals tonight, right? Or like, oh, I got a south wind. Not at 5 miles an hour, you don't.
You have thermal wind.
Yeah, so you learn those things of like, when is the wind going to do what you actually think it's going to do? And to your point, you kind of, I'm big on data, right? So, like, for the last 5 years, I keep a calendar. Every day from September 1st to January 31st, I write down the high-low temperature, the cloud cover, sunny, whatever. I write down the wind direction and speed. I capture whether or not I use DeerCast just to tell me if it's like a good or great day, right? Because that just factors in the high pressure and all that shit and the moon and whatever. And then I use the red moon guide and I circle all the red moon days on the calendar. And then I use my camera intel and I map out all my big buck pictures from September 1st to January 31st. And what that helps me reinforce is, right, it's just data collection for fun, a lot of it. But what it allows me to do, especially when you start building history year to year, especially with this buck, right? I'll be like, okay, like I was so planning for him to get into his rut area this year because I was like, last year when he showed up there, he'd be there for 3 or 4 days. And if the wind was doing this, he was usually going this way. And if the wind was doing this, he was usually climbing this way. And it was like, I really had a lot of data on him over the last couple of years to where I felt really good about where to be when. It's just he never went over there this year, and I never got to use it. But that's what I try to use it for, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you just envision that day where you're like, okay, I know where he is, and now I'm trying to predict where he's going to go, and if the conditions are right, how's he going to use that area? I mean, is it just like cell cams, right? Is it perfect? Is it definitely going to tell you where to be when? No. But to me, it raises your odds, it raises your confidence, it makes you feel more confident in where you're sitting and when. And if you put in stand time, like I do or you guys do, like anybody who just freaking sits a lot, dude, if you ain't got confidence, man, it's not easy to sit, right? Like that's the hardest thing.
Yeah,
for sure.
One of my big things is I always try to like give myself 2 or 3 reasons why I'm going to that particular spot on that day. Like I'm not gonna flip a coin and say, oh well, I haven't been in this stand in a couple of days. Let me go see what happens there. Like no, like
you don't hunt like that. That's how I hunt.
Every sit has multiple reasons why I can convince myself it's going to happen today at that stand, and it doesn't always happen, but I need reasons to be there. But one of the questions I have for you when you in these spots that you're hunting these big target bucks, are you seeing a lot of smaller bucks on these sits and passing them, or like when you go into these big buck spots, is it pretty much him and does, or how's that working with other smaller deer? Like are they still using that same area?
Yeah, for me, like, I think something I've learned about, and again, I don't know if it's just my area versus, like, because what I always try to learn from, like, Eastern Mass guys is because, like, Eastern Mass is, like, a whole different beast, right? than like Western Mass and the bigger woods and the different terrain and all this stuff. But like, I always love to pick people's brains for like what works out there, what works out here, that kind of thing, and just to know the difference, right? I've heard a lot of stories about guys that'll like hunt a big buck and he'll dominate the hell out of an area, kick everything out, and he's in there just owning the piece, right? I don't see a lot of that here, and I think the challenge, and maybe it's just my experience, I don't know, right? Just like this is what I've dealt with,
Right?
For me, they're more likely to be around other deer, and I don't know if that's a comfort thing or if it's just because it's the rut, obviously, or just to me. I've always seen it play out a lot around here in terms of like the hierarchy, right? I've seen our bachelor group stay together all the way to the third week of October some years. And you're like, what the hell are they still tolerating each other for? But it's like they barely fight and they barely they get along fine. It's because they're all brothers and they all live in the same damn area. And there's like, they've already established a pecking order before the rookie comes. And there's not that much competition.
Correct.
So I don't know if it's just a homebody thing where like a lot of the bucks here, I kind of figure out their range and they, maybe I just don't have enough information on them to see those situations where they really clear out all the other bucks. Now, I've certainly been in situations where, young bucks come flying out of the thicket because Big Boy's in there kicking them out when he's in there with his dog. I've certainly seen that. But honestly, like especially when I look back over all the bucks I've killed, when I look back over a lot of the big buck encounters I've had, like, sure, call it 50-50. Like 50% of the time, they're probably cruising alone, doing their thing, and they're being loners like they are that time of year. But I would also argue probably 50% of the time, they're, either with or right behind other deer.
Right.
And I don't know what that is. Like, quite honestly, I very much buy into the fact that they're smart and they know to let the other deer go through first.
Well, that's the other thing. And some of those sits where you're not seeing your target buck, you're probably seeing other smaller bucks.
Yeah. But that tells me the area's alive and that the deer are working there. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, why would he get up off his ass if there's no reason to?
Correct.
Right? Like, when the does were heavy on this particular spot that I killed this year, I knew, because, I had already hunted for, 4 weeks or whatever, and I had already had some good hunts, a lot of good hunts in October that I was around does and shit like that, and the bucks still weren't moving. And as you guys probably know, and I'm sure we even talked about prior to this, everything started late this year. Like Halloween wasn't Halloween, right? The first week of November didn't even seem like the first week of November this year. Everything didn't kick into gear until like November 7th. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, the rut's finally here. And the stand that I killed in was by far the most active stand that I had. And again, that's why the first buck was there, right? After that rainstorm, he finally came out of his hole to the south that I knew he was laid up in, because I never got never got pictures of him anywhere else. He always came out of the same area when I got pictures of him, and whenever he came to that stand, it was always from the same area, and he did the same thing the day I shot him.
Right.
I think he just finally got off his ass, right? And then when I killed my big one, does everywhere for days, right? And I know he had been out looking and been lonely, so I was like, where else would I be, right?
So one of the reasons why I asked you that is I try to convince people. There's a lot of people, like we talked about it earlier in the podcast. You got some people are quote unquote trophy hunters or big buck hunters. Some people are just meat hunters and all that stuff. And when you get into conversations like this about, all the extra overanalyzing everything with like playing the wind and playing the thermals and really just like honing in and dialing in, a lot of people will come back and say, well, I don't need to do all that. I'm just a meat hunter. I'm just, or maybe they're just happy with a smaller buck, a spike buck or 6-point or whatever. But what I try to tell them, and you can confirm this for me, if you try to apply some of these tactics, like you're hunting the biggest, baddest buck in the woods, you are going to get so many more opportunities at more deer and more, smaller deer that would make these people more than happy to take. But they don't apply all the tactics because they think it only applies to being a trophy hunter or a big buck hunter. But like it pays dividends for all the deer in the woods.
The other thing that adds to that, too, is that if they were to apply similar situations, just like we've been talking about throughout this whole entire podcast, and talking about having a lot of deer and seeing a lot of deer and smaller bucks in those situations, and it, I know this is kind of crazy and it's going to sound stupid, but when you pass those smaller deer like that, 15 minutes later, the biggest buck of your life could potentially be right behind him because that big buck is saying, whoa, what is little Tommy doing up walking around in my territory around my girls in November? What is he doing and why is he going down there? And then that big buck is next. If you pass that 3-year-old, that 5-year-old could come strolling by in less than 5 minutes being like, yo, where is he going and why is he near my does? And so if you could go from a meat hunter to a trophy hunter almost instantaneously.
No, I agree, and I would even add on to that to say, like, even if there's no hot dough in the area and the place is boring as fuck that day, he ain't getting up before the little one bedded near him does, right? Like, that's just their typical pecking order mentality in September, October, whatever, right? Like, when they're grouped up, December when they group back up and go to food. Big boy lets all the other ones get rolling first, and then he follows up and makes sure it's safe, right? That naturally, that's how they are.
Yeah.
So if it's boring, like, that's another element to the scenario too. Let the little guy go first, right? Like, he's making things comfortable for what else might come out. No different than the does coming out first, right? They're making it comfortable for what else might come out.
You can
I mean, that's so spot on, right? Like, and it's hard to it's hard to like hand that off to somebody, right? Because you got to want to receive it, to your point, right? I mean, like, I can teach it, but does somebody want to go through the steps and the thought process and the little extra attention to detail and doing things a little different routine or whatever, again, to increase your confidence, to maximize your odds, right? I mean, that's why we do it. We're students too. I think that's a big thing. Like, I can say that about myself, right? Like, I have never once claimed to have figured these suckers out, right? Like, dude, that's why we do it, man. They're impossible.
If you figure it out, let me know. Give me a shot.
I don't know a freaking book about
You got my
it.
number. Just text it over to me. You know, I'll be here listening.
But the crazy thing about the whole entire situation is that all three of us started off as those meat hunters. There's a pile of little deer that I've shot. And you know that. So there was that turning point where we're like, whoa, time out. We need to now go. And if I pass that deer that I would have shot last year, and then now that one deer is going to walk, I could be in the same trail that I would have shoot that little deer on, and that big deer is going to roll on behind him. It's just that time. It's that turning point in clicks. And not one of us that is sitting here talking right now will ever talk against somebody who does that or shoots a little deer. It doesn't matter. That's their game. But we're just trying to say is if you pass that little deer, that next deer could be a big deer. We're doing the same thing that you're doing, but you shot the first deer. We passed that deer to shoot a big deer. That's all we did. We didn't do anything different than what you're doing. We just didn't shoot that first deer. We had the same tactics. We did the same things. We just happened to pass that first one, and the next one that rolls by is that big one that we ended up taking. Period.
Right. But I'm not even you're absolutely right. But I'm not even talking about passing a deer. I'm talking about, when I started to actually be super analytical about where I'm going to sit. All right, it's a northwest wind. I'm going to sit on the south side of bedding. All right, the thermal should do this. These deer should be here because of this, this, and this. That's when I started seeing a fuck ton of deer and getting great encounters with all those small, the 4-pointers, the 5-pointers, the 6-pointers, all the does, the basket rack 8-pointers. I'm seeing a ton of deer when I started over analyzing. And when you try to teach that to quote unquote meat hunters or whatever, I don't need to do that because I'm just, I'm brown, it's down. You can't eat the horns. I just go to my stand and I do that. And it's like, yeah, you can do that, dude, and you're going to shoot some deer. But if you want to see a shit ton of deer, try this. Or
you could shoot a shit ton more deer.
A lot, you're going to see, a fucking pile of deer if you take that extra step, man.
Yep. And it's like, and like we said, right, it's not knocking anybody, right? Like, I was a weekend warrior for, a part of my life, like, when I could only hunt Saturdays and shit. I went through all that. My dad did it his whole life. Like, for those guys, I know what they're feeling because I've been there before, right?
Absolutely,
like, they only
100.
get their Saturdays, but they want to hunt more, and I'm not, and maybe they can't, right? And I'm not knocking them for not being able to, but that goes back to maximizing your odds and opportunities based on what you're capable of doing. If you want to increase your goals, if you want to involve more thought into the process, more aspects of it that to put those odds in your favor, go through those different routines, right? Put the wind in your favor, hunt smarter. a lot of guys, to your point, are like, I don't have to do all that. I don't have the time. And it's like, well, if you give me 6 hunts a year and you hunt them super smart, like your odds go up, right? Like way more those 6 days that you have to hunt versus saying, fuck it, I just need to sit there for 6 days. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's a whole different mentality. Right? It all comes down to like you get out of it what you put in, right? Like, it's like if you think just going out there and sitting is going to get you enough encounters, get your meat for the year, more power to you, man. Go out there and do whatever you enjoy, get them however you want to get them, hunt them however you want to hunt them. If you feel like you have time to put in and, you want to be more successful, then open your damn ears and be willing to change, right? And then take on some of these different tactics. And Steve, you hit it on the head, man. When I started playing the wind, and it was me and my buddy that like figured this out years ago when we got into filming and all that shit, right? It was like, wow, we're actually smart hunters now. Like, look at us. We're seeing deer like we're supposed to be, right? We're sitting there like, holy cow, like it's all working out. Like now we're having more encounters. Now our sits are paying off. Now, but everything was going good.
Isn't it?
But it was noticeable. And then, like again, not to tap myself on the back, right? But it's a good example of this learning process and like how I've developed and evolved. After that point of starting to play the wind, that evolved to what we were just talking about earlier. In October, I play the thermals and I play the wind to come out of the bedding area. In November, I now play the wind to where I expect the buck's going to come because I know he's going to want to use that wind wherever the hell he's trying to get to. That all evolved, right? And again, that increased my sightings. It increased my encounters. It increased the amount of young bucks I pass every year. I can look you straight in the eye and tell you that I could tag out in mass every year before the end of bow season if I wanted to. I mean, and everybody should strive to get there if you have the time, because honestly, it does take stand time, right? Like you do, even if you are a super smart hunter and put all these things in your favor, you got to have the stand time. You got to put the time out there. Right. You got to be out there. You got to put this stuff to work. You got to learn from your mistakes. And you got to keep evolving. The biggest thing, like, so this hits home with me big time, like with my dad, right? Grew up home with my dad. He's like my hunting buddy, hands down, no questions asked, right? My dad has more trophies on the wall in the last 6 years than I do. Now I have a hand in most of those bucks, and I'm not trying to take anything away from my dad, but my dad will be the first one to tell you, he don't give a shit about hunting the wind. he doesn't have time to think about it. He doesn't care. He just wants to go freaking sit in the woods, and he's retired now, so he's got more time than any of us. And dude, he puts in his time. But it's paid off. My dad's shot 5 Pope and Young bucks in the last 6 years, I think it is, something like that. He's got 4. Yeah, I think he's got 4 or 5 Pope and Young bucks in the last 6 years, and it's just from sitting his ass off. Now, part of it is I've put him in some great spots over the years, and that paid off. Like when I shot my buck in 2017, I think it was, my big giant 8-pointer gnarls that I had on video. My dad killed out of that same stand like a month later at the end of November. Because I was like, dude, it's finally a southwest, and he was looking for somewhere else to try. I'm like, go sit there. Shoots a slammer 8-point, right? Put him in another spot that I had hunted for a few years, and then I left. He goes in there, starts wearing it out. Like 3 sits into October, he shoots a freaking slammer that I had hunted 3-4 years prior. Wicked old, like 9-10-year-old buck, right? My dad freaking connects on him. Then I bring him over to my area that we're now hunting now, right? And he's been in there for 6-7 years. Like I told you, I left for 5 or 6 years, right? So my dad got it backfilled and had been hunting in there. And shot an awesome, his first big buck a few years ago. And then last year he shot a slammer 8 in there. And it's great because, like, now I can share the woods with him again. And, like, it's funny, like, we rag on each other all the time, right? Because my dad will be like, yeah, I don't give a fuck about your thought process and your red moon days. And you're like, whatever, right? He's like, where should I sit today? So I'll be like, Dad, go sit this stand. It's like, whatever, right?
I don't want to hear about it, but where should I go hunt?
You know what it sounds like, Trev? It sounds like we should have his dad on for a guest instead.
The first one to say, you don't care.
Oh, we should have. Yeah, just cancel this podcast.
We're just gonna have your dad on instead.
Your dad is the one that we need on the podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
But
Dude, seriously. But I love that, right? Because it's been like a new fun dynamic between me and him too, right? Because it's like, we always rag on each other anyway. But the dude, he loves grinding on me because he knows I lose sleep over this shit, and how hard I pursue these bucks and the thought process. And Steve, I can tell you're one of those dudes that probably sat in your truck for some extra time thinking about what the hell you were gonna do, right? Because that's what happens when you're weighing all these factors.
Dude,
You're
so analytical.
Right, this stand seems like it's the one today, but it could be this one, and now I have to debate between the two, and it's all in my own head.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. So I had an encounter with my number one shooter this year. Pretty much, it wasn't my first time hunting that property, but it was that first sit where I was like, okay, this is the morning. I know where to be. I'm gonna go in here. No daylight pictures, just basically predicting off the conditions for that day. Like he should be here, and I had the encounter at 20 yards, 25 yards. Good encounter. He leaves. So rolled the dice, same conditions the next day. Hey, I'm going to go back to the same tree in the morning. So I go back, have another encounter with a really nice buck, give him the pass. The next day, the wind shifted, it went from a northwest to a southwest. Still works because any kind of west kicker is going to work. In the back of my head, I said, I should be on the other side with the southwest, but you know what? I've had 2 fucking awesome days in this tree. I'm gonna roll the dice. One more time. I'm gonna go back to that tree for the 3rd day in a row. Guess where he shows up? On the other side. And I fucking knew. I knew with that south wind instead of the north wind, he should be there, and I didn't go. And it's like, damn, you knew better, but you second guess something or whatever.
And one of the problems was going back on what we were talking about was the mobile hunting over you setting up stands like you do, Rob. Is that being that mobile hunter? And I was going to break into this before, but now's probably a little bit better time. When you're mobile hunting, you're not setting up those spots. And I don't know how many shooter bucks that I've had to pass on because not being able to have a spot by being a mobile hunter, because you just go into a spot and you have small little pockets to be able to shoot, and you don't have your big shooting lanes, and you have to pass on those big bucks because you don't have ethical, good shots. I mean, I could blow through a ton of shit, right? And I could make that shot. But on a big buck, you don't want to make those shots. You have to hold off. So you have small little pockets.
I don't want to put myself in that position, right?
Nope.
Yeah.
So that's one place that I find that every year, I work my ass off. Like, my big motto is, like, the day the season closes, the new season starts. Like, our season goes out December 31st. January 1st, I will be in the woods scouting, getting ready for next year. And I find every year I get a little better at something. I put a little bit more time into something, but some way or another I slack somewhere else. Like, you know what I mean? And all my presets always get shooting lanes cut, like you say. But the one thing that I dropped the ball on this year is I should have prepped more trees for a mobile set. So I know, like, I can go to this tree, I can hang in this tree on a November morning, and there's already shooting lanes cut, even though the stand's not there. And I didn't do enough of it.
But it might as well be a stand, right?
Yeah. I didn't do enough of those trees this year, and that's the difference. That's why my number one target buck is still alive to this day, because there's no other reason why that deer shouldn't have been dead on November 8th. But it is what it is.
And you said it, like, it played out as you expected. You just made the wrong call, right?
Yeah.
And I would have done the same thing you did, because at the end of the day, why shift, right? Given what you laid out, right? Yeah, I would have sat at the 3rd day, hands down. No questions asked, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's like I had a very similar situation this year where, so my number one, who disappeared November 2nd, right? Like, literally disappeared on me. I haven't seen him since, which is freaking weird. And I am already losing sleep over it. But late October, I get that pick at 4:30 in the morning. He's headed up the hill, hits the scrape right in front of one of my stands, and he heads south. And I'm like, all right, there's only a couple different things he could do. He's either going to keep cruising, which it's late October, the deer barely doing shit. I can't put him on doing another half mile, right? It's close, it's already close to like 5 a.m. I'm like, he ain't going that much further. And I know he beds, just south of that stand. But I have a stand just a little further south of there, too, that I call my ridge stand. It's higher up on the ridge. Nice little bench they can cruise across. They bed right up above the bench, whatever, right? So he goes by that camera, and the first thing that came to my mind was, I'm going to go sit the corridor right over that scrape he just opened, and he's going to come back tonight, and I'm going to kill him. No, he didn't come back. He freaking continued on at 11 o'clock that
was at the
morning.
ridge.
At 11 o'clock in the morning, he got off his ass and kept going in the direction he came. And he went right by my next stand over 300 yards away up by my ridge stand. You know, and I was like, and that was the last opportunity I had. No, I'm sorry. Halloween night, I'm back in the corridor, and he went by the stand that I killed him twice this year. Halloween night, right? Which is, 500 yards away. But I'm like, dude, like, just those little things, right? Like I'm trying to put him on a plan, and I guess we're wrong, right? You know, and it's like that's how it goes sometimes. And like, had I thought get ahead of him instead of get behind him, like I would have freaking killed him that morning at 11 o'clock when he finally got off his ass to stroll. So yeah, like those things, I agree, man. It's you can totally overthink it. But I'll never underthink it.
I love it. I love the chess match.
Yeah.
Dude, yeah.
So my question is, Rob, did you get are you going to get the sheds to your number 2 that you shot this year?
So I haven't got the balls to ask the guy. I texted him. I did text him to let him know he's dead Thanksgiving morning. You guys, you almost couldn't make this up, right? So I shoot him the night before Thanksgiving. Liver shot. I knew he was freaking hurting. I knew it was lethal, hands down. But I'm not. I'm done. Gone are the days where I play around and go blood tracking at night for a big buck. If I know he's hit lethal and I don't know how long it's going to take him to die, he's sitting overnight. That's it. That's my easy decision on my part. Had it worked for me enough now where it's like, dude, when in doubt, back out. I play it every time. Mm-hmm. But it was one of those situations. So I go in. I woke up at like 6 o'clock that morning. No, probably 5:30. Me and my dad were trying to get there first late Thanksgiving. So obviously we had to get back to the family. Pretty sure he's dead. Pretty sure we're just going to drive the quad in, track him, find him, get him out of there. No problem. So I wake up like 5:30, whatever. I get a freaking cell cam picture from my Bucks rut area of a hunter walking by my trail cam in between my camera and my stand. Now I know because I met this dude who found the sheds last year. I know he likes to hunt up there. I know he likes to hunt up there late November. I mean, he told me like we had an hour-long conversation in the woods last year when I met him, right? And we still text, we exchange numbers, we text every once in a while. Totally good dude, right? Good hunter. Dude's a master shed hunter. Dude pulled 40 sheds out of the towns around me this year, and I'm like, I don't even know how you do that. Like, I thought I put a lot of time in, and I don't even really put in like crazy time like some people do with sheds. But dude, this guy's a master. He pulled 40 sheds last year, and these are, dude, I don't know how he did it. Honestly, like I've spent enough time up here to know it ain't easy what he did, and he had to put in a shitload of time and a shitload of miles and be damn good at what he does to find 40 sheds. So sure as shit, it was him. He went by my cell cam Thanksgiving morning to go hunt just below one of my stands I have up there to hunt this buck. And sure as shit, I'm like, hey, because I found my buck, right? We found him, recovered him, no problem, easy as can be. And I texted him. I'm like, hey, was that you? I'm like, I got a picture of somebody going by my stand. Is that you or your buddy Bruce? And he's like, oh yeah, that was probably me. He's like, I figured why the hell not hunt up here nice morning or whatever. He's like, this is only my second time in here this year. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm like, send him the picture. I'm like, sorry to say, but the wide 10 is no more, right? And he goes, well, that figures. He's like, I'm sitting up here wondering if the wide 10's ever going to make an appearance because he's like, I don't even think I had a picture of him yet this year. And I was like, I only had 5 or 6 pictures of him on that side total this year, and I have plenty of cameras over there. And yeah, it was just, funniest thing, right? But yeah, no, I may ask him. So I ran into him last year. I got a picture of the wide 10 half rack doppelganger is what I named him. He was half rack last year. I want to say like January 5th or something. Like first week of January, he drops half his rack, and I get a cell cam picture of him that morning. You can see the freaking red on his scalp, right? I'm like, dude, that shed's got to be there. So that was like a Wednesday. Me and I'm texting my buddy. I'm like, come on, when can you come? Like, let's go. Like, 2 of us should go. Let's see if we can comb this area real quick. So we go in there Friday for like 3 hours. That's all my buddy had. We scour all the feed sign in the snow. Don't find it. I go back by myself Saturday because now I got all day. And I'm like, and there's a snowstorm coming Saturday night. No joke. So I get out there Saturday. 3 freaking times as I'm scouring the area, I keep catching glimpses of this other dude, and I'm seeing it, right? So I'm like, so finally, sure as shit, we're walking into each other, right? And I'm like, well, I might as well go talk to the guy and freaking meet him. Sure as shit, he's holding the freaking shed I'm after, right? And he's still looking for the other one. And I'm like, no, he didn't drop it yet. He only, I just got a picture of him. So we started talking about history, all this shit. Turns out the year before, when me and my dad were in their shed hunting for him again, boot tracks everywhere, right? Him and his dad had already scoured the whole place and found his freaking shed. So the guy's got both sides from the last 2 years. And I just so happened to run into him. Now here's where the story gets even more silly. 2-3 weeks later, I'm on the adjacent ridge that I took my bucks off of this year. I'm over on my adjacent ridge, just shed hunting, whatever, like hoping, maybe I'll stumble on his other side, or I'm also looking for my number one, right? Like, starting to shed hunt and whatnot. And I catch glimpses of him again, and I'm like, you gotta be shitting me. He's over here now? So I text him, and I'm like, hey, are you on the other ridge now too? I was like, I thought you said you don't even really go over there. Yeah, good, likely story, right? he's freaking got the other side, hey. He freaking goes over to that ridge and picks up the other half of the shed, and freaking, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. The 2 days I ran into him last year were the 2 days he was picking up the same thing I was after.
Well, that's the great thing about shed hunting. Oh man!
I'm like, you can't even make that up, right? I'm like, yeah. It's like I literally ran into you the 2 days you found each of his sides. Like, you gotta be kidding me. So I don't know. I don't know. The dude's got so many sheds. Maybe he'll part with them.
You gotta ask.
I haven't got the
you gotta ask.
I mean, it's.
I know. I might have to.
But on the same token, at least you were able to bump into him. You were able to gather the information that you needed to gather, right? So it's kind of a give and take there. Yeah, you don't have the antlers, but hey, maybe you could in the future. It is what it is. That's part of the game, and you just kind of take it for what it is.
Plus, at the end of the game, I mean, it's great having the sheds in your hand and having them in your man cave or whatever, but at the end of the day, finding the shed's really just all about confirming he's alive. So whether you have him or not, you know he's alive.
Right.
And building that history and whatever, right?
Yeah.
And like, this was one of those perfect scenarios of just, straight mutual respect, right? Like, neither one of us knew each other whatsoever, like, at all. We exchanged numbers. We've been texting since last year, off and on. Nothing, whatever. We just talk a little bit, exchange a little information. We were both honest and clear about, like, I told him, like, he knew where a couple of my stands were. I didn't know where his were. I don't know if I just didn't see him or whatever, but I think he used the climber a lot too. But, totally cool, right? We exchanged information. We were friendly about it. We acknowledged that we were after the same buck. Between the two of us, hey, we got to talking. And it's like we figured out like 8 bucks got taken out of that rut area last year. 8 freaking bucks came out of that whole area last year. And if it wasn't for my 2 giants I was after this year, I was like, dude, there is nothing left for shooters. like all my up-and-comers got killed last year that I had on camera. Like the whole place got massacred. And, but it was cool, like, because that's the kind of stuff we were able to share information on. He knew groups that I didn't know. I knew groups he didn't know. We put a lot of information together, and it was cool. And it was all mutual respect, right? It was like, dude, you're after the same thing I'm after. God damn, that guy's a better shed hunter than I am. I know that. But yeah, it was just cool to run into him and kind of share that. And then, I got to be the one to send the text. So no.
Well, that's the thing. You can have all the sheds in the world if you want. If you want to see him, you can come see him on my wall.
That's it.
But
that's what it's all about.
Well, so that was the craziest part, right? So that buck this year put on that crazy big freaking brow tine that he had or whatever. He never had any, like, he's always had great, like, 5-6 inch brows, but he's never had anything, just a nice, he's always been a nice symmetrical wide 10, nice thick beams and great brows, but he's been that since he was 3, right? Like 3, 4, and 5 pretty much just got a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger. This year, more points, more stickers, the freaking freak brow time. And he had no idea. He had one picture of him, and this dude's one of those dudes that hangs his cameras way the hell up looking down. And he said he couldn't even tell if it was when he got the picture of him. He didn't even know it was him for sure because of the angle, and he couldn't see that big crazy third brow. So when I sent him the picture, he was just like, "Holy fuck, did he blow up?" Right? He was like, "Dude," he's like, "Look what he turned into." I was like, "Yeah." I said, "Imagine what that shed would have been this year with the big freak brow. That would have been a great shed to pick up." But it was cool.
So something I've been wanting to ask you the whole time, I'm putting it off. In this area where you're hunting, because I know it's bigger woods, but it's not like massive big woods. Is there any destination hay fields or even like backyard grass or anything like that? Are these like where are these deer eating? Like what's their main destination food source when there was no acorns?
Oh, this is a topic that I love as a food plotter, right? I have failed miserably. If you look at me as a food plotter, I've never killed a mature buck on that food plot in 12 plus years. Now, I've used that food plot to keep inventory on bucks. I've used the food plot to keep nighttime pictures of bucks. And the answer, before I continue on where I was going with that, yeah, there's some ag, right? I wouldn't call it like ag. It's like there's corn. I don't think deer around here give a shit about corn, to be honest with you. And if they do, it won't be till January or very late in December. And there is none around at that point around here. So those cornfields are like kind of pointless to them. The clover and hay fields, low quality hay, they could kind of give a shit about it. High quality hay in certain areas, like especially in certain years, they will gravitate towards it. If it's one of those years, there's not a lot of food in the woods and they're really on the green, right? Last year and this year were two great examples, and I'll tell this story just based on that. Same two bucks, right? My number one and number two. These dudes, I've been watching them since they were 2.5 years old. They're both 6.5 this year, right? Except for the one I killed. He ain't getting older. But my food plot last year, they were hammering it, right? From August to September into October, like just about into Halloween in the first week in November, I was getting pictures of them 4 or 5 days a week at night, swooping through whatever time, either early morning, middle of the night, sometimes like 8 o'clock right after dark, whatever. But dude, they were hammering my plot. They were checking it and they were eating it for months. And then the rut comes like almost every other year and they just stop touching the field. It's like they just don't give a shit anymore. Even if the does are using it, they'll stay outside of the field and just find the does outside, right? The point I'm getting at is regardless of the ag around here and regardless of whether or not they actually use it, you ain't killing one of these big bucks in an open field. Can you? Absolutely. You might have 1 or 2 chances a season to do it, is my synopsis, right? And I say that, again, using my plot as an example. It's an acre of food, so there's plenty of food. It's secluded at the end of a wicked long, narrow field. And it's a great meat spot, man. We've killed 13, 14 deer off that plot. We've killed this many big bucks off it. Mm-hmm. I've had one big buck encounter over the 12 years in that plot. And it was like, actually that was the first time I ever saw a doppelganger in real life. He was 2.5 years old and he was with the buck I named him after. He was, turned out to be his doppelganger. Was a buck I named Napoleon, and he was a 6.5-year-old 10-point at the time. Looked a lot like Doppel, just wide 10-point and great brows, right? And hunted Napoleon for tons of years too, and had tons of history with him, and had pictures of him at the plot all those years and whatever. But that was the only daytime encounter I ever had with him, aside from just maybe a handful of daytime pictures over years.
Right.
So really, like. That's where I feel like food plotting is like a wicked fun hobby, and I literally laugh at people who instantly are like, "Oh, you hunt over food plots," and it's like, dude, it's not what you think it is.
No, this isn't Kansas.
No, and you know how many times I sat my food plot this year? Youth Day. That was it. I didn't sit in my food plot once because I knew get back in the woods, get up on the ridge, don't fucking waste your time in the field. In my experience, and I do a lot of food plotting on my own property too. I have a little 13 acres here in Montague on some power lines. It's just a hobby. It's become a hobby, right?
Right.
Something else to do in the summer, spring, whatever. Learn ways to attract deer, and maybe someday I'll have enough, cover and food and whatever the hell I need to get them out in the open to make it happen. But to me, these bucks around here, dude, they're gluttons for security. They really are. They hate open fields. I don't care what the hell you grow. Honestly, it doesn't matter what you put in the ground. They still won't come out till after dark. Yeah. But, I mean, that's literally, and all. Again, I'm using my information, my experience, whatever, to build that opinion. But like, I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you, don't waste your freaking time in a field around here. It's not worth it.
No, I agree with that. I mean, I don't hunt fields at all, and I have fields on my own property. But no, the reason why I asked is I was just curious how important it is, like even in your e-scouting in some of these areas, you're finding these big bucks. How important is like, you have this thicket, whether it be laurel or the whips or whatever. How important is it to you to have some kind of green in the general area to establish some kind of movement, or are you finding some of these deer, like, it doesn't even matter if there's a field around at all?
No, it really doesn't, because like there are those years. I mean, I can think of 2 or 3 in the last 12 or 15 years where I actually expected it to happen this year, and I heard tons of people talking about it.
Right.
No food in the woods. There's no acorns. They ate them up early. There wasn't even many that dropped, and the ones that dropped got eaten up early. They're hammering fields. I'm like, they're not hitting my fields. They're hammering yards. I'm like, they're not hitting yards around where I'm hunting. And and I understand that changes region to region and whatever. I get that, right? But like, I just wasn't seeing it. And I expected it because I wasn't seeing any food in the woods either. And I'm even going to like some cut areas, and I'm like, dude, they don't even seem to be browsing hard in the cut areas. So then I'm starting to wonder, where the hell are they feeding? What are they really on?
Right.
But I was still on deer. But no, I mean, to me, what I think is most important in the type of areas that I hunt, if you want to get away from bow pressure, you can get away from bow pressure. You just got to go a little farther. And I know everybody's heard that, and it's kind of cliche, right? Like, don't hunt the parking lot, go further than everyone else. And some people tell you, no, just hunt the parking lot because everyone else is going further. Like, whatever, man. My whole thing is get the fuck away from everybody. Make it harder to get there, because honestly, less guys are gonna put in the effort to go that far. Mm-hmm. I had one stand this year that took me less than 35 minutes to get to. All of my other stands were 45 minutes to an hour to get to, and that might include a short bike ride before I hoof it. Right? Like, I use my e-bike in certain spots where the trails are worth it. But to me, it's all about getting back there in those areas that they're comfortable. At the same time, like, I know those areas down low, right? I keep tabs on them. I didn't run a lot of cameras down low this year, but I know those woods like the back of my hand, so I know, like, if I had to make the adjustment and go down low, it wouldn't be too hard to do so. But yeah, no, like, I really feel like the reluctance to be in the open, and quite frankly too, I don't know, maybe it's just like low quality hay they just don't really give a shit about. Like, those go down there and they may feed in the fields and whatever. But yeah, I don't see enough field activity to really draw it into any part of my plan as to be an important part of the plan. Yeah. Nor do I see them going ridge to field very often either. Right now, when they're hitting my plot, it's very easy to see they prefer to bed up above my plot. Because it's the closest bedding area. There's tons of elevation, and they got their honey holes up there that are thick as hell. But other than that, right, like, I don't know. Last year, these same $2, right? These same $2 in my plot like crazy last year. I might have got 5 or 6 pictures of them total this year in my plot.
That's crazy, too, because if you wouldn't have told me that, that's completely ass backwards than what I would have expected. Last year, ton of acorns, but yet you got them all over your plot. This year, no acorns, and they're not in your plot, which makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
No, I know.
No sense.
And it's the same thing, right? Because I'm sitting there going, dude, and I planted extra food this year. I put more winter food in than I normally do, kind of changed some of my plot around a little bit. And I'm like, dude, where are they, right? I mean, like, I think the last time I got him in there was like, I think it must have been that night I encountered him the next evening, right? So it was opening Friday, I think it was. That was the last time, that early that morning was the last time I got a picture of him in my plot. And I'm telling you, between my number 1 and number 2, I probably got him on my plot 5 times total. All summer, I'm talking all summer, all fall. Like, they barely went to my plot this year, and I'm like, and I know they're living on the ridge, right? Like, getting pictures of them up on the ridge. I'm like, I know you're there. You're just not coming down, not hitting the open field. Like, dude, I can't figure it out. Rather just add that to the list of unpredictable behaviors.
Right. I think another thing too, to tie everything you just said together, is ag. To us, you know how it is. Ag's a hayfield. That's all it really is. But ag attracts other hunters. Guys are so attracted to hunting close to green fields because that's what you see on TV. Everyone's hunting these fields in the Midwest and all that shit, right?
My plots, right? Because it's like a different scenery, a different view.
So all your hunting pressure is conjugated towards that ag. So, like, when you say, like, oh, you got to go, because I don't know how it is where you are, but, like, where we are, usually the ag's on private, which is closer to the roads, easier to access. So, like, when you say to go deeper, you're going deeper to get away from the ag because that's where everybody else is. And a lot of those bigger bucks are going to get pushed farther back away from, not because they want to be away from the ag, because they want to be away from the hunting pressure, which is all around the ag.
Yep, and quite frankly, that is exactly how it plays out in my area, right? Like for whatever there is for fields and shit down low, there's posted signs, but dudes have permission at those places. They're actually really popular hunting areas, and that's exactly why I work my butt way up that ridge, right? Is exactly that. Most of the guys, those farms are heavily hunted, especially during gun season. It's like Wild Wild West, but absolutely, right. It plays out exactly like that, and that's exactly why go a little further, go a little deeper, and get away from the areas that you see stands. Now, at the same time, like part of my area that I hunt on the hillside of my ridge, there's a dude in there with him and his son have 30 freaking stands. They just put ladder stands, hang-ons, wherever they want, and I don't think they've ever taken them down, man. There are stands everywhere up there. And I know I was close to that guy in a couple of my new stands I put up this year, but I'm like, hey, man, if you've been here for 15 years and these stands have never left, are you really a threat, right? Like I wasn't really looking at him as much of a threat or as someone who would add much pressure, right? Because he had so many stand options. Who the hell knew where he was going to be? And I knew the guy wasn't, because I know somebody who knows them. So I knew they're not hardcore serious trophy hunters and they're only after the same bucks I'm after and stuff like that. Did they have pictures of my bucks? Hell yeah, they did. And I'm sure they were waiting on them too to some degree, right? But I kind of weigh that too, right? What is a stand worth setting up near and what is a stand worth walking away from and finding a new spot, right? I think you play in the many factors of it. And to me, it's all about just going further than everybody else.
Nothing wrong with that, man. And that's the way you got to hunt. Yep. That's the way you got to do it. It's just the way that it goes.
Well, hell, I mean, if I could shoot big bucks in fields 10 minutes from my Jeep, you know damn well that's what I'd be
That's what I'm going to do, right? Exactly. Exactly. Well, Rob, man, I got to ask you one last question before we wrap things up, and that is what drives you outdoors? And obviously you've been probably thinking about it and waiting for this question.
Doesn't make it any easier.
No, it never makes it any easier.
No, it's what drives me, man. It's like I don't know, right? It's like you always want something that you could be really good at, right? Because if I'm being honest with you guys, I think I'm an all right hunter, right? I'm pretty good. But what does that mean? Like we were talking about earlier, right? What does that mean on the scale, or what does that mean to other people, or whatever? To me, it's really just about setting that goal and almost knowing you're not going to meet it, right? At the end of the day, you guys know we eat tags and disappointment for breakfast. So at the end of the day, that is it, right? I apply. I'm the same whether we're talking hunting, we're talking about my family, we're talking about sports. I'm a passionate person. I freaking love this stuff. I go in every year, hunting. I'll say it this way. Let me say it this way. From a hunting perspective, every year I set a few goals, right? I want to share information with people who need it and want it and are asking questions, right? Because like you guys, people reach out to me with random freaking questions. How should I do this? Should I do that? Whatever. Yeah, man, I'll give you my opinion, whatever, right? I love sharing information. I think that goes a long way. The other thing is youth hunting, right? We hit on that earlier, getting kids into it. And I won't be able to do it for kids new to it for years because now I got 3 boys in line. I'll be busy youth hunting with my boys for the next freaking 10 to 15 years. So I got my hands tied there. But nonetheless, I'll get all my boys in the youth hunt. You can rest assured that, right? And then the third thing is really just, it's putting the work in. It's the satisfaction that comes from that. No different than I work for my family, no different than I work for my career to keep that afloat, things like that, right? I think all that is what satisfies me at the end of the day. Do I ever expect to reach my goals? Hell no, right? Like I said, tag soup and disappointment. If you can't handle those things, man, don't chase big bucks.
I love that.
Yeah, I do too. It makes so much sense, dude. It's the good old American dream.
It ain't for the faint of heart. I can tell you that. If you. It's just not. You better expect some disappointment if you're going to commit to some of these goals.
That's being successful in anything.
Dude, one of the last things I'll bring up, right? So like you guys see like the social media craze, all the new stuff with hunting, all the new information, the new videos, saddle hunting, all the hunting public, right? I freaking love that show. Who doesn't, right? Like some of the stuff those guys did, and then now watching how that's spreading amongst the hunting community, I think it's cool as hell, and I think it's really cool to watch play out. I think what it all comes back to, like, you know, trophy hunting, like, it's not fun. And I hate that. I hate that. I really do. I wear myself out. I'm hard on myself. I beat myself up. Dude, it's a grind, right? There's no other better word for it. If you want that goal bad enough, you're going to grind it out and grind it out and grind it out. But what I equate it to, right? Because I got this younger buddy who's a brother of one of my best friends that I grew up with, and I grew up with him too, obviously. But this kid's got it all right, man. He's out there having fun with his friends. They're doing deer drives with bows. He's out there hunting on his feet and just having a blast. The kid's a meat hunter, has no quarrels about what he shoots, and like he'll take his opportunities. But the kid's a smart hunter, and he's having all the fun. So like, I love that, right? Because I can like literally live vicariously through that. But it does. It reminds you that like, dude, it is a grind. Like this is a choice you make. To be disappointed every year.
Especially in New England. Especially in New England.
The thing that's been driving
No doubt, man. No doubt. But I wouldn't have it any other way, man. I wouldn't have it any other way.
The thing that drives me nuts lately is like, I hate to say this, but sometimes I feel like we're almost attacked lately. And it's like, there's the big saying going around right now is like, shoot what makes you happy, shoot what makes you happy. And I hate to say it, it usually caters to the people that are happy with smaller deer. You know what I mean? Oh, shoot what makes you happy. If you're happy, more power to you, right? Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're a trophy hunter and you're a fucking asshole and all this shit. It's like, whoa, what did I do? Like all I'm doing is shooting what makes me happy. You know what I mean? Right. Like, that's what makes me happy. This is what I choose to do. Leave me alone.
You were never talking down on the other people.
You should be happy. I'm passing all those deer for you. Like, I'm doing you a favor. Like, leave me alone, dude. Like, I'm not bothering anybody. Like,
no, I agree.
What the hell?
Like a stigma. Yeah, it's like a stigma. It's like just because I set a high goal doesn't mean that I look down on you.
Exactly. No. Exactly.
Like, don't put that on me or imply that, right?
Yeah.
Because and it's so funny, right? Because that probably puts us on the defensive a ton, right? Where like I go into a lot of conversations and be like, look, dude, like whatever you do is cool. Like, try to give you an opinion based on that. Right? Like don't get mad at me because I'm coming in with a lot of information and experience that I'm going to share with you.
Right.
But don't be mad at me for it. Right? Like, come on.
But
same team, bro. Same team.
Yeah, but I'm not going to talk down on you.
Hands up, don't shoot.
No, you know what I mean? Seriously, man. I think that's so cool about social media. And I'm not a big social media guy. I'm not big on technology. I work in IT, and I'm not a big technology fan whatsoever. But when it comes down to I have people reach out to me all the time, and it's not because I'm like, oh, people reach out to me all the time. Like, I love that, dude. Like I have somebody random that I'm friends with on Facebook that we don't really talk much. We're hunting acquaintances, whatever. We might be in some of the same groups and comment with each other, whatever, right? Never even freaking met.
I think he's talking about me.
When somebody reaches out to you and they're like, hey man, how has this played out for you? How has this played out? What should I do in this scenario? It's fun as hell, man. Because at the end of the day, for me, my wife's bitching at me like, what are you doing on your phone all night? And I'm like, I'm talking hunting. Like, it's that simple, right? And I love that. And if I can share my experiences and my information and just give you kind of my take on things, man, that's all I can offer at the end of the day. You take it or leave it or do what you want with it, right? And it doesn't have to be me. The whole point is that's where we all need to just, partner up and we're all hunters. We're all doing the same thing. We're just at it at a different level. And it's not, I don't even want to say level because I'm not trying to sound like there's a hierarchy of hunters, right? But it is. To your point, shoot what makes you happy. Well, I'm sorry. I'm passing everything unless it's 5.5. I don't feel like I should be an asshole for that.
That's what makes you happy,
just
right?
because I like disappointment more than you doesn't
I fucking love that.
I'm a bad guy.
Tag soup and disappointment, man. That is fucking classic.
We all got to work together so that, we're all getting attacked from the inside out, not from the outside in for some reason. And it's...
Yeah, that's what it is, man. Especially in a day like this, you guys know, man, we got to protect this shit because I live in Massachusetts, man. They're trying to gobble up our land, gobble up our regulations. Like they put regulations on top of regulations, man. It ain't getting any easier for us. I'm still wondering when I get to start hunting October 1st because all them guys out east get to start hunting early. That's bullshit.
Absolutely. That's a whole different ball game, honestly, because you guys are actually later than the East guys.
Yeah. And they get 2 extra weeks just because they have more deer. I'm like, dude, it's the same amount of tags. Why can't I get 2 more weeks? Like, come on.
That's
but,
crazy.
and that, again, right, it is what it is. Like you said, like, why are we trying to, ridicule each other, like, when we're all after the same damn thing, man? Have fun with however you're having fun with it. I could care less how people hunt and get their deer, man. Do I love gun season? No, I don't hate gun season because of the types of hunters and the guys out there being jackasses. I hate gun season because it adds pressure and I can no longer hunt unpressured deer. That's all. That's all it is. You want to go out there with your groups and pile them up, man? I'll take what's left, right? Like that's how it is. We all hunt public land. That's just how it is.
Absolutely. Well, man, we really appreciate you jumping on with us. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and, if you have any finishing regards.
Shit. I mean, you can find me in Montague, Mass, or on Facebook. Probably it, man. I'm a public-facing guy at the end of the day, so
I love it.
But no, appreciate you guys reaching out, and I do appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to do this because, like, quite honestly, as I told you guys earlier, right, like, you can tell I'm passionate about it. You can tell I talk a lot and all that stuff, but, like, at the end of the day, when it comes to, like, putting myself out there like that on a broader level, took a little while to make the decision to come on here, but really appreciate you guys, having me out. And I think this was really cool as hell. So, love talking hunting with you. It was cool in this forum. Totally good stuff, man. It was totally good stuff.
We really appreciate it, man. We really honestly do. And hopefully we can build a relationship from here on out. And for everybody else, thanks for taking the ride right here on the Outdoor Drive.